Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Shaw.
Mrs. Willbrand.
Coming at you again. This time we're talking about the United States in World War I. After war is declared, and we're just going to get right into it.
Let's go.
Let's do it. All right, so America was really not ready for a world war, really for any war.
No.
Again, things weren't going terribly, but it had been a long time since the Spanish-American War, and even that was barely a war. So we weren't ready for like a global conflict. At the time that we joined the war in 1917, we only had about 200,000 men ready to fight, and we did not have a strong enough navy to compete. Again, we did have a strong navy, but again, it was only like patrolling areas in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and the Gulf of Mexico. Not really what we're going to need. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get people, men in this case, ready to fight. So that's going to be the Selective Service Act. This is going to require all men to be registered and possibly selected. That's supposed to say possibly, not possible, for the draft, which is forced military service. And we still do this today. We register for the Selective Service, and there is actually a push now that says that women should be added to the Selective Service requirement as well, because women can serve in the same functions that men can. Anything to add there, Ms. Willbrand?
No, you did a lovely job.
Thank you.
All right, so the government is going to oversee the war effort. Nationalization is the takeover of industry and to be run by the government. Because the war effort is a national effort, we do see nationalization in factories. Businesses are incentivized to change to wartime production through laws and other efforts from the government. And then the War Industries Board is established in 1917, and it oversees the mass production of the necessities of war. Remember we talked about mass production in the last video is a thing now. So we can produce a whole lot of stuff for war very quickly and pretty cheaply. This is also going to open up a whole lot of jobs for people during this time because of this mass production of war necessities. Factories are going to be full speed ahead.
What's interesting about this is that since we weren't ready, we got the men that were ready to go to war, but the production hadn't quite caught up yet. So when they were training, they actually used like sticks and rocks originally in their training sessions because we hadn't made them weapons yet. And so you see here like a picture of a bunch of tanks being produced. This is what happened. They had to like literally change people over from, making cars and things like that to producing tanks. And sometimes you did that on your own. You would just do it if you would get like a government bonus basically. And sometimes if somebody didn't want to, they would just say, hey, you're going to do this anyway, even if you don't want to, because we need this to happen. And it's like a patriotism thing.
Yeah, you wanted to.
Yeah, we're trying to help the war effort, and we can do it in this way by, mass producing tanks.
They're going to sell it to you, which we'll talk about here in a little bit.
So U.S. production during this time, it increased by about 20% overall, which doesn't sound like that much, but it really is when you consider what like 20% of like $1 million, country and that kind of economy can do. Because of industrialization, we were already a really powerful economy, a booming economy, and really increasing that at all is going to be really, really impressive. So that's the first thing. The next thing was that railroads were actually nationalized during this time and became far more efficient than they were. Remember, we had a bunch of problems with the Populist Party and the farmers. The railroads were overcharging for things. That's not going to be a problem anymore. We did address that a little bit during the Progressive Era, but now now the government's going to run it, and it should be a little bit more. Usually, when the government runs things, it gets more affordable. Oil production was also heavily regulated and then forced towards war production. So while there weren't that many cars now, things for like kerosene for lamps and things might have been in short supply because they needed those things for the war. And so you would basically, do your part by, maybe using candles instead of kerosene lamps, in order to try to, help do your part as well. Speaking of doing your part, you can. Your Americans were encouraged to plant victory gardens. I love that name. That's just really my favorite. Again, this is done by the U.S. Food Administration. They encouraged Americans to produce victory gardens, which are basically just gardens that produced food that would be able to feed your family. And so if you're able to feed your family, you're not going to need to buy things from like the store. You're not going to need as much, from, the farmers. And then that food can be used for the military and the soldiers overseas.
So, I told you, selling the war. The U.S. is going to raise taxes and sell war bonds to finance the war. So a war bond is basically just a piece of paper that the government says, I owe you. So in so many years, you can cash in this piece of paper and we'll give you your money back, and usually then some, a little bit of interest. So people would purchase these bonds as a way to help the war effort. Here's my money up front. I'll get it back later. The war is being helped. Like I'm doing my part as a citizen.
It's like a win-win.
Yeah, so nice. To increase and keep support for the war, the U.S. creates propaganda. Propaganda is biased communication designed to influence people's thoughts and actions. So posters, even now we'll see like propaganda videos and commercials, and advertisements, victory garden advertisements, propaganda, any of that is going to be propaganda to get people amped up to want to help the war effort, to be a part of this big, big thing that is helping America and the Allies win.
Yeah, and the two that we have here are both pretty positive in the sense that they're talking about America and like trying to encourage people to, support America and America's war efforts. But a lot of the propaganda posters that you'll see, especially in the activity that you're going to do, it's really negative. Like
yes.
there's a lot of like demonizing of Germany and things like that to kind of get that fear into people. There's one really famous one that where like the German army is essentially shown by a gorilla, and he's wearing a helmet, a German helmet, and it says culture on it. Or I'm sorry, he has a bat that says culture on it, and he's carrying like Lady Liberty, and her like clothes are all like torn up in his arms, and he's like coming on American soil. And anyway, it's this whole big thing.
Terrifying.
It's terrifying, and it's designed again to influence people's opinion and to try to get them to support the war more effectively.
Yep.
So I'm sorry. Go. You're
doing great.
You want to go?
No,
okay, I'm so
you
sorry.
love this one.
I'm so sorry. So we're going to talk about maintaining support at home, but really the thing you need to understand is that war creates fear. And when war creates fear, people need somebody to fear. And in this case, the enemy is now Germany and Austria-Hungary. Again, we're going to really hone in on Germany, though. And there's a lot of nativism that's going to pop up again. We talked about it during industrialization, favoring the old immigrants to new immigrants. And like, again, people are really not going to like Germany. And so there were many, many Germans living in America, many of them in St. Louis. Again, the Anheuser-Busch Brewery, things like that, like were all started by German immigrants. And so that is going to really lead to a lot of tension in America. One thing that has been used in American history in the past is called the Espionage and Sedition Act, and versions of this law always pop up when any war happens. And basically what it means is that citizens can be fined or jailed for speaking out against the war. So what you'll notice, and that's what's really important to take away from this, is that in war, your freedom of speech can be limited. And so even if you disagree with the war, if the government thinks that your speech is dangerous, they can limit your freedom of speech and throw you in jail for just speaking your mind and using your First Amendment right.
There's basically like a little disclaimer on the Bill of Rights, which is you get all of these rights as citizens in America, asterisk, except during wartime. A lot of our rights they don't go away because they don't need to, but the government could essentially take them away if necessary to protect us.
And the other thing you need to notice is this last bullet is that they weren't targeting regular citizens that were just speaking out. They happened to be targeting very vocal critics of the U.S. government in general. Socialist leaders, labor leaders, people that are really anti-capitalist. Yeah. They are going to, they who have been calling for change for many, many years, now they are going to be thrown in jail and basically, charged for under the Espionage and Sedition Acts, basically just because we don't like their views right now, and we don't want to hear that kind of talk.
And this sentiment's going to carry on through World War II and the Cold War with communism as well. So it's not something that necessarily goes away. So. All right. So the war does impact society. The Great Migration is a large-scale movement of African Americans from the South to cities in the North. So all of these new industrialization jobs that are created when the economy increases by 20%. Means more jobs in those northern cities for African Americans who have been working on farms and things in the South. Because remember, the South is primarily agricultural. So we do see this big movement of usually more poor rural southern farmers to the South because they can make more money in factory jobs. Women also move into jobs during this time. Previously, they were really mostly working from home. And these jobs were run by men, but now the men are overseas fighting. So somebody needs to step in. So we see women stepping into their shoes. 1 million women do enter the workforce during World War I, but after the war, many of them lose their jobs to the men as the men return home.
One thing I would just want to add is that the Great Migration was also like African Americans were also coming up to the North to take jobs that had been vacated by soldiers that were now fighting in World War I. And just a brief, real quick reminder, there was horrendous discrimination during this time, especially in the South, but really all over America. And that's why they were coming to the North, because they now had that opportunity to not only escape discrimination in the South, and face less discrimination in the North, perhaps, but also they knew that there were jobs. Like, again, you're not going to really care who's in this job anymore. You need this job to happen. Again, I'm talking about just anybody in the North. You need this job to happen, and we really don't care if it's, the person's black, white, banana colored, whatever. Like, that's like we don't care. We need this job done.
Remember those Jim Crow laws that we learned about in Unit 1? Those are still in place in the South, and so that's going to be part of the reason to move north as well.
Oh, it's my turn. Okay, sorry. So again, we're really skipping a lot of the actual stuff that happened in the war. What you need to know, again, you don't really need to know it, but like the U.S. used the convoy system, was just a pattern of moving your ships, and that was very successful to help protect U.S. ships and merchant ships from the German U-boats. So that was really, really positive. That was one thing that America could help out with right away. But the idea is now we're only fighting on one front because Russia's out of the war, but the United States was able to join that Eastern Front, or Western Front rather, and they were able to help the British and the French troops push back against the German offensives. And so German progress, German successes, again, it was really a lot like a stalemate, but again, it was Germany fighting off two really powerful countries. So when the United States joins, by late 1918, these German forces are really getting tired and they're ready to surrender, just because, they really can't face British and French troops and U.S. troops on their own anymore. Anything to add?
No.
It's real simple.
So the collapse of Germany. Germany and the Central Powers do lack food and supplies, including the citizens. On November 3rd of 1918, Austria-Hungary surrenders to the Allies. November 9th, the Kaiser of Germany, the leader of Germany, gives up the throne, and Germans establish a republic. And then November 11th, 1918, 11/11/18 at 11 a.m., Germany agrees to a ceasefire, which means we're going to stop shooting each other, and signs an armistice.
One thing you should know is that they're not surrendering. Like, Germany is like they don't look at this like it's the end of the war.
They're just willing to put their weapons down. Yeah,
they're willing to stop and then negotiate an end to the war. But they're not that's not how they're looking at it, as we are giving up.
Right.
Okay, guys, I think that's it. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Final death toll. Just if you needed one more depressing thing before we left you today. Again, you see that Russia had the blunt force of this.
That's going to be important when we start talking about the causes of World War II as well.
Yes, definitely.
Keep that in mind.
Yes, right. And again, that's what you should remember too, that Russia even pulled out of the war. The idea that the United States even had, we only had 116, thousand men die, but we had only been in it for about a year.
Yeah.
So
Joined really late.
Again, comparing the numbers, you're looking at a really big difference. Like Germany's going to really have a lot of men killed, a lot of casualties. And this is just really a horrible atrocity. Like this whole thing is just really bad, and we got to figure out how to kind of make amends and how to. It's like you just got in a really bad fight, like with your brother or your sister, and you got to still live with them. Is that okay? That's probably not an okay comparison.
It's a much smaller scale comparison.
Sorry. But anyway, we got to figure out how to help these countries live together from here on out, and that's what we'll talk about in the next video.
See you soon.
See you guys.